Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. Currently, we are making a basic introduction slash tutorial for John Tiller's software games. And as I have mentioned several times, if you know this basic system, you can play any of his games. There are only slight derivations off the rules. Of course, depending on what time period you're in, you may have some different units. They may move through a hex at different speeds and whatnot, but that is all controlled by the parameter data right up here, F2, and that allows his game system to port over 600 years of warfare. So we're learning that basic system, and to do that, we are playing his game Campaign Antietam. Of course, that's an American Civil War game, and more specifically, we are playing the scenario Blackburn's Ford. Blackburn's Ford were the initial shots fired on the Eastern Front, at least in a major sort of way. It preceded by a few days the first battle of Bull Run, which is often considered the first battle of the American Civil War. And so we're playing this scenario. Now, if we look down here to the left, we will see that we are on turn 3 of 21 that are scheduled for this scenario. It is our turn. Now the Union goes first in this one, and so they have already gone for their third turn. And it's 9:40 a.m. Time increments in this game are 20 minutes, so hexes are 125 yards. Time increments are 20 minutes. So you're talking a pretty drilled down scale here. And it's July 18th, 1861. Now, this is episode number 6. I'm going to call this episode Firing and Melee because we're really going to get into some combat here. Given that the Union has now come around the corner of this forest, so you're talking about a 500-yard forest. These guys were riding their ponies down the road, turned the corner and said, "Oh, uh-oh, we got some Confederate soldiers just across the ford." Now, I had a very good question in the comments to the previous episode, which goes to, I think, kind of a general big point, which is, was this just a stupid move by the AI? Now, before I get to that, let's go up here. Now, we've talked about all of these green buttons. Let's take off objectives and labels. Okay, so we can see the situation a little bit better. We see here the Union, we have now spotted them, we know what they are. We have a pretty good idea of how many men they have. It's 100 some, right? That's that actually sounds like something a Confederate scout may have come back and said. I don't know, it's 100 some. It's 1XX men. We don't really know, what their strength was. Um, when I say their strength was, this is how many men they have now, what their maximum strength would be. We do know their quality, which I guess is kind of interesting. I guess we can guess that based on their armaments. Maybe our scout knew the brigade that it is, or we looked and said, oh, well, they have, rifles instead of muskets, etc. I don't know. Their range, we actually do know that that's about 1. But we're playing with fog of war, so we don't know some things. We do know that they're dismounted. They've gotten off their horse. So the general question in the comments last time was this, what is the AI just dumb? Like, why would it come with cavalry dismounted, which means, they can't get away fast? Why would they do that? And my answer was twofold. One is the AI in this game, I think, is actually quite passable. I think the AI will give you a good go of it because these scenarios have been around for a long time. The AI, they know kind of exactly what they're going for. The objectives, if we put it back up here, they're going to be gunning for those. Is it as good as a human player? Of course not. But so how could this happen? I actually think there's a really good explanation, and that is we were not spotted here, right? There's a forest here. They're coming down this road. They're not, it's very possible could have maybe spotted these guys, but they definitely wouldn't have spotted these guys by any line of sight unless they would have come down this branch, right? But coming down this branch, they're hugging, the forest is to their left as they come down, and they turn the corner and they say, "Oh no, what are we going to do now?" Right? Because with the way this game is, it's turn based, it's based on movement points. It's very likely by the time they got down here, they only had 2 or 4, maybe 5 movement points by the time they got down here. So they don't really have the option of saying, "Oh, we're going to turn our horses around and just fly out of here." Um, it's, kind of what makes a turn-based game maybe not quite as realistic as a real-time strategy game, right? Because I guess in a real-time strategy game where you're not dealing with movement points, it gets here, they see it, they see these guys and they hightail it, right? We've scouted them, we know where they are. Now the reason I'm going through all of this is it's kind of a strategic thing for you to think about when you play the game, which is cavalry, you have to think about playing a little differently. You always want maybe a few points in reserve. You don't want to if your guy's here and you want to go here, you don't want to do the click on where we pull him all the way here and all of a sudden the computer goes, and all of a sudden he's down here. You kind of want to go hex by hex, kind of creep along, even if they're in movement mode, creep, which this may have been before. I guess we don't know it. They're not in mode now. They're in combat mode, but I'll talk about that in a second. You just kind of want to creep down here hex by hex and see what you can spot with your scouting units each turn. You also don't want to get in a situation where you kind of do this, where you go plop and you've got 0, 1, or 2 movement points left in a terrible position. I mean, this cavalry is in really bad position. So the second part of this question is, why are they dismounted? Well, if anything, this is a smart move because it's their combat mode. If they were mounted, yes, can they move faster? They can, but if they don't have any movement points left, it doesn't really matter how fast they move, right? They're more prone in their movement mode, which is mounted. So having them dismounted is actually a smart thing if you've already gotten yourself in this bad of a position. If you're in this bad of a position, at least you're in their combat position. Now, when cavalry is dismounted, they will only fire at 75% of their strength. That is because they have to have, a quarter of their people holding their horses. So, they're only going to be at 75% strength. So, anyway, I just kind of wanted to go through the thought process there. I get that it's maybe not, there's not a headline label what all of that means. It's more like this is what's going on with the game. Let's just talk a little bit of strategy or how this could happen. And now we get to talk about what are we going to do about it. Well, we're in a very strong position when it comes to this unit. Now we don't know how many other units they have back here. We do have some spotting on these guys from our cannon over here to the left, right? So to the extent other people would be up in these hexes, it's very possible that we could spot them with units that we don't necessarily think are right in the thick of it. Um, and that's always something to think about when it comes to elevations, is maybe having, some cannon or something else at the highest elevation you can, if nothing else, just to get some spotting on the enemy. But now that we're here, what would we do about this? Well, let's kind of scoot out a little bit. And oh yes, we have spotted these guys up here. What do we have? Unknown, unknown, and we see that they've got what appear to be infantry, about 500 strong. And then with the flag on top, they've probably got a leader unit, but they've got at least one infantry unit of 500, probably another similar, in size, in a column. So they're moving, they're in their move mode. So what are we going to do here? Well, let's go back down here first, and I'll kind of go through what I think about when I'm going to do this. We'll also try it a couple of different ways. I've got the game saved right at this very moment. So, you may say, hey, that's dumb. Well, we may just do something dumb because we can always go back to the save just to illustrate points. So, what would be the first thing I would do here? Well, always, in my opinion, fire your guns first if you can. You want to soften up the enemy before you either, fire at them with your muskets or rifles, or you melee with them. And we're going to do both here. But the first thing I would do is fire my cannon at them if I can. So let's highlight these guys. We'll look at it. It's a range of 12. Well, this is obviously within 12. Now, we talked about firing last time. The closer in hexes this is to you, the more damage you will do. There are essentially four things that really matter when it comes to firing, and they, include how close you are to the enemy unit. So it's called firing effectiveness. It's the weapon type. Well, in this case, we've got 6 pound guns, and we could go look that up. It's the range. Well, it normally has a range of 12. Every hex this comes closer, the more damage this will do. How much fatigue this unit has? Well, we have 0, so we're at optimum efficiency. The more tired something gets, when I say something, I'm talking about units. The more tired a unit gets, the less damage they'll do when they do fire on enemy units. It goes into the calculation. And then the fourth thing is quality. Okay, and so if you have an A quality unit, it's going to do more damage than an E quality unit, and that, is from A to all the way down to E. Now, in the user manual for the game, they give you a very nice rundown of the entire calculation of how that works. If you want to go check that out and look that over, please do. But those are the four main factors that come into firing effectiveness. When you're firing, what is your effectiveness in doing it? And that gives you kind of a base number, right? So it's how many guns, how far away we are, what our quality is, if we're fatigued or not, and what kind of guns these are. So it's really kind of five. When I say gun, what kind of guns they are, you know, put in there, well, it's multiplied by the number of guns. And the same goes for infantry, right? We've got muskets times the number of men, the quality, the fatigue. These guys are only one hex away, which will be, maximum damage from firing. Now, when units are this close, we can also melee with them, which is kind of more like hand-to-hand combat. Let's put our bayonet on and charge, etc. Okay, so anyway, we're gonna try to fire these guns at them, but we've got a problem. Let's look at our view. We can't see them. So by this unit, which I would imagine was probably here. Well, I know it was here at one point. The AI did a smart thing here and got it under this ridge and got it where our guns cannot fire at them. We can't see them. We don't have them in view. Now you could argue, oh, well, we could loft it, right? Probably not a smart thing to do if our units are this close to them. But let's hit control and try to fire at them. And you'll see this. Okay? And what this is telling you is you're being blocked. You're being blocked at firing at this unit by your own units. The game will not let you friendly fire like that. Let's try this gun. Again, range is 18. It's well within range. We can't see it though. It's under this ridge. And if we hit control or if we press down our fire button with this unit selected, we'll try to fire at it by right clicking. And now this elevation is blocking, it's essentially blocking our view. You can tell that by the V or looking through your binoculars. You can't see this unit, so you can't fire at it. So our guns are worthless. So to the extent that the AI got here and was surprised, it did the smartest thing you can do, which is it got down into this ridge and went to into its combat mode. That being said, it's in a whole lot of trouble because we've got masses of troops here. You know, they've got 100 some. We've got 270, 183, 200, 451. You know, I mean, we've got well over 1,000 troops here. Now, keep in mind that we have a stacking limitation from our parameters of 1,000 men in a hex. We are nowhere near that. 383 in this hex. Um, I can't remember if Longstreet counts or not to make it 384. You know, if you get down to where you can only squeeze one more man in there, God bless. But I just can't remember if the commander counts. Um, we've got 270 here, we've got 451 here. So I guess if we put them all in this same hex, we might be getting close. Oh gosh, now I'll have to do the math. 720. Yeah, we would be over 900. This would put us at like 1,100 men. So we couldn't mass them all here. We probably wouldn't want to. I'm just saying, you know, you want to kind of stack units with your general if you can, your leader. Um, and we'll get to that in the next episode when we talk about disruption, routing, and recovering from that. So we will get to that when it comes to damage. But I do want to talk about damage for 1 second here. You will see that we have taken 3 casualties. How do I know that? Well, we can go up here to info and look at victory, and we will see rebel losses. We have taken 3 losses worth 1 point. So that'll also tell you our infantry losses are worth 0.33 points for this, you know, scenario and for victory points. So 0.33 for our infantry. But we've taken this loss here. Every time you take a casualty, you have to check for disruption and you have to check for routing. But we'll talk about that. So we saw this last time when this unit got here, this Union unit, it fired. You know, it could move, and even if it has 0 movement points left, it can still fire. Now it can't move after it fires, but it can use up all of its movement points and then fire, and that's what it did. Okay, so before we do any of that, let's see if there's any other just stray, you know, units we want to move around. Let's move this cavalry up. And, you know, this drag and drop system, because of what I talked about before, and maybe, you know, this could have been you if you played the Union and you dragged and dropped. You said, "Oh, there's Blackburn's Ford. Let's go take it." And you dragged and dropped, and you got yourself in this bad situation. Really, only do the drag and drop behind your lines. You know, quite a bit behind your lines, where you're probably out of the range of most things. I mean, this wasn't even the best drag and drop because if the Union got a gun here and we just haven't seen it, now that seems improbable since we can see their guns up here, but or their units up here. But if they did have a cannon here, it's possible they could, like, you know, take a pot shot at our cavalry here. It would probably be within range. So you just want to be careful, you know, stay behind the forest, try to stay behind ridge lines like this. This would have been the smarter way to come down here, or even, you know, over this way because maybe this elevation would have blocked a shot back here. Uh, I did this kind of just free flowing, letting it go. Our supply wagon, same idea. Let's get it over here. Again, that was not the best drag and drop, but this isn't what I'm trying to illustrate. Beauregard, we're gonna hide him right here behind the forest. Everybody will say, "What are you doing, PGT Beauregard?" And he's like, "Well, I'm just hanging out with my horse by the forest." Um, but he's got his 2 guys well within his command range, which is huge. Yeah, you know, it goes all the way up here, so well within command range. So we've moved these guys, you know, our back facing guys. One thing, if we were really playing the game, that we may think about is moving this cannon this turn, because since we can't fire it, we might want to move it and actually move it up here to where it's a lot more useful. You can stack it with other units. As a matter of fact, just for, for fun, let's limber this guy up. He's got 9 points left, and let's select him. Let's get him going this way. Now he went down to 6. We changed elevation. It's 2 through clear. 4, 3. Now he's on a road, so it's only 1. This actually worked out better than I hoped. Now here's what you don't want to get to is where you go here and he stays limbered because then he's in his prone moving position. So we're just going to leave him here. This would have been a stupid move if we were really playing. As a matter of fact, we're not actually going to leave him there. We're going to put him there, and now he's got 0. But I want to be able to unlimber him next time, so I put him there. Okay. This also will allow us to show this move to the top. I want my infantry guy to be on the top. Our cannon is now on the bottom, but now, we'll have cannon up here. Would not have done that if we were really playing the game, but hey, we're just having fun, right? So let's talk about what we're going to do with our infantry. Well, this guy over here, he could move here, and then he would be within one, he would be in melee range, which is 1. You've got to be right next to the guy, and you've got to be facing him to melee with him. Um, so do we want to do that? Well, we may do it eventually. For this time, we're going to highlight him. We're going to hit Control, and we're going to right click. And we're going to right click. He's not facing the target. See, our right, we're facing this way, right? Our right shoulder fire would be here, and our left shoulder fire would be here. So, it's one, two, or 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, depending on how you want to look at it. Your firing view are these 3 hexes, and where you can trace out from them. We are not facing him. So we're going to have to turn to the right a click. There you go. Now we can hit Control, right click, and he fired at them. We wounded or killed 3 men. It's that simple. That's it. Now he is fired. He can do nothing else this turn. He can't move. He, if he was next to him, well, we'll talk about melee here in a second. Okay, so now we would move on to this stack, or maybe we'd move on to this stack. As a matter of fact, let's move on to this stack and have them fire on him as well. We could do that because this is front forward, right? Left shoulder, right shoulder. So let's hit Control and fire, and we got 11 men there. Okay, pretty good. Now let's go to these guys. Let's highlight them all. We'll take off command. Let's highlight them all. Now, Longstreet doesn't technically fire at this guy. He's not out here, shooting his own musket or rifle, as the case may be. But it doesn't hurt to have him highlighted. You can unhighlight him as well. It just doesn't matter. Um, so let's have them fire. Hold down Control, right click, and we really, tore them up there. 25 men. We had 11 over here and 3 over here, I think. So 39 men altogether. That's a big part of this force. This force is probably disrupted now, which will hurt their movement. That will also lead to, other things that we'll talk about next episode. But we have now fired from all of our units at this unit, okay? Now we can go up here to info and look at victory, and you will see cavalry losses 39, and that's what we said, that, they had lost. Now, it doesn't differentiate between killed, maimed, seriously wounded. It, these are losses. They're no longer in the fight, okay? And well, you'll see the Union had 31 points subtracted. So these are, subtracted. And so they did previously have 76 points. Now they have 45 because it says first side Union. So down here, total points, we're looking at the total points for the Union. The Union has 75 objective points, okay? Minus 31, okay? But then they add 1 point back for the infantry losses they've dealt us. You come out with 45. Okay, so let's do this a different way. Let's open our save game here. No, we don't want to save that. And let's do this turn all over again. Okay, this time maybe we'll be a little more careful with our cavalry. We'll put Beauregard over there with them. These guys will kind of, him and haw back here. Okay, they're out of movement points. These guys are fine. We know we can't shoot our cannon. Okay, now then, let's say we want to melee with these guys. First of all, let's take this unit and again get them facing at least to the right shoulder of these guys so that we can do something against them. Let's take these guys, okay, and there's two different ways you can do this. Now you can either come up here and begin melee. Oh, right, we cannot melee against our, you have to have them selected. I was like, huh? Begin melee, and you'll see this like burst, like a shell burst on here, right? Okay. Now you've told the game we want to melee with this unit. So then what do? Add to melee. Okay. Well, it keeps yelling at us because we're not highlighting the proper group. What we would do is highlight them and add to melee, right? Okay. And because we're doing that, they defensive fired at us. We talked about defensive fire last time because we're going to be attacking them. So they get first shot and they wounded 6 of our men or killed them, whatever the case may be. Now, let's highlight all of them and also add them to the melee. Again, they defensive fired us. Now, there's no way to avoid that. Okay, no matter how you do the melee, if you're going to be charging and attacking these guys, they get first shot at you. And so when you begin the melee, they get a defensive fire shot. Okay, that's just how defensive fire works. Um, so you can see highlighted in yellow here, everyone that's part of the melee. Now let's try to do this one. And it yells at us, cannot attack from a non-adjacent hex. Okay, let's bring them down into the alley. What is this, 1930s Chicago? No, into the valley, the depression here, and add them to the melee. Cannot This cannot be added because it exceeds the stacking limitations. What does that mean? The stacking limitation for this hex is 1,000, and that's why I counted out these earlier. These units add up to 1,100, so you cannot bring them all into this hex because they will exceed the stacking limitation. That also, keeps you from having 5 million, troops that are doing an assault in a hex that is only 125 yards, right? It kind of keeps you from running around these blobs of troops that just assault everybody. I think it's a nice little mechanic. You know, if you play war games, you're familiar with stacking limitations, but that also applies to you meleeing. Okay, so these guys cannot melee, but we moved them down here a little closer. We've got these guys on our right shoulder. So, we only moved, we can still fire. So this time, let's do it with the button. Right click, we took out 10 men with that fire. And as you see, the melee is still active here. We've still got the cloud, or the shell burst on top of this group. Let's go look at the next button, which is melee odds. Okay, melee odds, we cannot see them. That's because we have the fog of war on. If we did not have fog of war on, we would be able to see what our odds are against this particular group based on all the modifiers, okay? And the modifiers are very similar to the kind of modifiers you think of with firing effectiveness. Now, of course, the type of armament you have, like whether you have a musket or rifle, doesn't really matter, but your quality, the fatigue, right? Those things matter. So again, it's common sense, and we can go through those, or you can look in the rule book. There are certain modifiers that matter. Elevation matters for firing, for instance. But we'll get into that next time when we talk about disruption and those sorts of things. So anyway, we have them all lit up. They're ready to go. Now, what could we do? We could either resolve the melee, which is then going to tell us, hey, what happened with this, right? Or we could say, this isn't a great idea. Let's clear this out. So, just for illustrative purposes, let's clear the melee. Okay? Those guys are no longer highlighted. You no longer see the shell burst. So I've still got this pressed down. So let's, get off of that. Let's do this a different way. So there's a second way that you can do this. You can highlight this unit and you can drag him on top. It tells you we don't know the melee odds, but you see the burst. They get first. So when we cleared the melee, that got rid of that first fire. So it's kind of a fiction, right? It's showing you what the defensive first fire will be, even though it hasn't happened yet, because you really haven't ordered the melee until you resolve it. So if we went and looked up here at victory, you would see that we really haven't lost these men yet until we resolve the melee. So let's double click on all these guys, bring them there. Okay, now you see all the people that are going to be in the melee lit up, and let's go ahead and resolve it. And now you see how many men did the attacker, which is us, how many men did we lose? We lost 14. Looks like we lost, some men from each group. Strength 93, strength 97, strength 97. We've lost some men. They're all disrupted, which, like I said, we're going to talk about next time and why leaders are important. But we lost 14, they lost 82. As a matter of fact, their unit is gone. It's just gone. They only had 100 some. We caused 82 casualties of some sort. The rest, surrendered, were surrounded, so on and so forth. They are now off the board. You've essentially taken their counter, their cavalry counter. Whoops, it's off the board now. Um, and so that's how melee works. I think hopefully that made a lot of sense to you. There are two different ways. You can either do it with the buttons or you can just do it by highlighting and dragging them on top of the unit. All of the units that you want to melee, you can drag on top of there and then resolve it. So you can do it one of those two ways. So this has been firing and melee. Now next time when we come back, I'm going to leave the game right where it is. We're going to talk about disrupted, what that means, how you can recover from it, and why commanders are so important. Um, how they help recover from this situation. Let's put it that way. Not only this commander, but this commander back here, Beauregard. We'll also move these guys around. Hopefully, we'll have some more union come down the road, and we can fight a little bit more next time. But for Strategy Gaming Dojo, this has been a blast. We took out a whole cavalry unit here with a melee, pretty intense stuff, right? We bayoneted up and took out a whole cavalry brigade, I guess. So anyway, for Strategy Gaming Dojo, I really appreciate it. If you like this episode, please hit subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks as always.